anyway. But because the World Trade Tower is such a high-profile building worldwide, it's not only at the heart of a financial district, it's a magnet for tourists who go to New York as well. One of the first major terrorist incidents within the USA. Just to repeat that...
Helen, what do you have?
I suggest that at least one of these planes may have been hijacked before crashing.
Of an hour and a quarter.
Extraordinary.
We believe the South Tower, one of the Twin Towers, collapsed entirely. This clearly took the firefighters you're watching there completely...
6 people died in that attack, the work of Islamic extremists.
Of events in America brought to you by BBC News 24. It's been a day of horrifying violence in the United States, a wave...
Good evening. As a sister city to New York, London is sharing some of the shock being felt across the Atlantic. And as it sinks in, we're increasingly turning our thoughts to how we'd cope if it happened here. Tonight, London is on a high security alert. Ken Livingstone has been briefed by senior Met police officers. The headquarters of the London Stock Exchange were evacuated, and American staff at Citibanks were told they could go home. Terrorist assault.
Many here sought out television.
I don't know how tall they are, but there's a lot of people and they could not have got out, so that's
I can't say anything about it.
This afternoon, meetings were held outside. Hundreds had evacuated their offices here and at other high-profile buildings like the London Stock Exchange. Some people feared London might be targeted too. For a end, London's Mayor Ken Livingstone...
And friends. Live now to Gillian Joseph, who's outside the US Embassy in Grosvenor Square. Gillian.
Well, the embassy has stepped up security, as you can see behind me, but the embassy hasn't actually been evacuated. Staff are still inside, making frantic calls, as you say, to family and friends abroad to find out what exactly is happening.
Airports owner BAA, which operates Heathrow, Stansted and Gatwick, is advising passengers, especially if you're travelling to the US, to contact the airline before midnight tonight. That's all from us this evening. We will have an update for you later tonight. Now it's back to News 24 for a special programme. Goodbye.
Hello, a very good...
Revenge.
From ITN, the ITV News with Trevor MacDonald.
Good evening.
This is BBC One. Now the BBC News with Peter Sissons. It's 10 o'clock.
Terrorists attack the heart of America, the panic and the certainty that casualties are horrendous.
Good evening. We start with the capital's reaction to the catastrophic events that have rocked the United States. Within minutes of the attacks, a massive security operation.
They were quite simply enormous. Each tower was 1,350 feet tall, 110 stories high. The World Trade Center was the largest commercial complex in the world, effectively a mini-city.
Carlton Weather, sponsored by...
Welcome to the programme. Tonight, London is on high again. For the moment, good evening.
Good evening. For most of the British Isles, it's been another dry day.
At this year's last... We know who you are, Mr. Hooter.
In light of today's news in America, there have been changes to the schedule tonight. Brighton Bill returns to BBC One at 10:35 next Tuesday. And the film Fire in the Sky will now be shown at a later date. So now BBC One meets the Curry Queen in Boss Woman.
Me?
In light of today's news events, BBC One is now joining BBC News 24 earlier than scheduled.
You're watching a BBC News special on BBC One and BBC News 24 with Peter Dobby and Carrie Gracie.
Good evening. The United States is struggling to come to terms with the worst terrorist attack the world.
Mr. Hooter.
Because of today's news, we've changed the schedule now on BBC Two. We're off to the rainforests of Africa with Natural World.
You're watching Carlton, part of ITV1. Our next schedule.
This is BBC One. Due to ongoing developments, we've a change to our schedule now as we join BBC News 24 for a BBC News special.
Dawn in New York. Thousands have perished in the world's worst terrorist attack.
This is Carlton, part of ITV1. We now cross to the ITV News studio to join John Suchet.
The terrorist attacks that killed thousands.
We've only touched the surface.
This is BBC One. Now the BBC News with Darren Jordan. It's 1 o'clock.
America awakes to a new day as its government condemns...
And then eventually into northern England.
We touched the surface.
Part of it.
Coming up next here on CITV, we'll be chatting live to the winner of our phoning.
Mexico.
California.
Very, very determined to keep talking. The important thing is to try to find out who did this. If we find out who did...
John Thomas.
A major new series starts tonight, going deeper than ever before. The Blue Planet at 9 o'clock here on BBC One. Howdy.
Some changes to the schedule tonight on BBC One. Vets in Practice will now be at 7:30, followed by an update on the news from America at 8 o'clock. After the Weakest Link at 8:05, the National Lottery winning lines earlier than scheduled at 9:20. And then another news update just before the major new series The Blue Planet begins at 9 o'clock. And that's the revised lineup for this evening on BBC One. Now on BBC One, an extended BBC News with Hugh Edwards. It's 6 o'clock.
America says it's at war, Mr.
Home, clearly frustration.
BBC One. Now the news.
This is LWT, your weekend ITV, with the biggest game in town. Now London Tonight with Kate Harding.
Major airlines operating out of the capital. That's all for now. We'll have a special edition of London Tonight at 5:30 tomorrow afternoon, looking back at this week's momentous events, their impact on us here in the capital, and what they mean for our future. That's at 5:30 tomorrow. For now, though, have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.